I just found out it's improvement week. Maybe a good motto for all of us. I don't know. I'll take that to heart and maybe remember that for the next 3 or 4 minutes. If it lasts for longer than that, then I'll be surprised as much as you will. But we'll do our best. Maybe I'll put that on the to-do list. Here we go. Buckeyes improve. That's the goal on a bye week with Marshall ahead on September 21st. Welcome into Buckeyes Live right here at the Voice of College Football. Steve Hellwagon right next to me, of course. Bucknuts 247 Sports. Tony Gerdeman down below because I've only done about 15,000 shows on StreamYard and I still can't figure out how to line us all up consecutively across the board. So Tony, hope you're okay down there. You can join Tony on Buckeye Huddle and Buckeye Weekly. Guys, how we doing today?
Doing great.
Now I know how all of those poor people felt in steerage on the Titanic. Thank you, Mark.
That's right. All right. Hopefully it's a better outcome for you. Steve, improvement week. What do they need to improve on? Should it have been 66-0 last week?
Well, improvement's always a relative thing. You're just talking about each player continuing to drill down their fundamentals and getting the schemes down perfectly and to where everything just becomes second nature. And I've been pretty impressed with their approach the first 2 weeks. I think they've played 6 quarters out of the 8 of pretty good lights-out football. It was 17-3 at halftime of the Akron game. They then beat them 35-3 in the second half, which is pretty good, and then 56-0 this past week, which was really good as well. But again, Akron and Western Michigan, neither of which are going to contend in the Mid-American Conference from what I can ascertain early on. Doesn't appear like either of them are going to be quality MAC teams this year. So I think you have to take all of it with a grain of salt. It was great to get – they said they had 80 guys who actually got on the field this past week. And, you want a way to get everybody excited about what they're doing is put them out there on a Saturday in front of 100,000 of their closest friends and family, and that's one way to do it. Get everybody out there, and probably some pep in the step of a lot of people over there coming to work this week. Kind of a truncated work week, even though it is improvement week. Going pretty hard on the field Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, taking Friday off because the coaches are going to fan out all across the country on Friday to go see high school players play, may even go to a few high school games if there are some on Saturday to attend. The players will have Friday and Saturday off, and then they'll get right back to work on Sunday with a normal work week, getting ready for Marshall a week from Saturday at Ohio Stadium. That game has been announced as a noon start on Fox Television, so everybody from coast to coast will have a chance to see the Buckeyes and the Thundering Herd. Marshall 1-1. They beat, I want to say, an FCS team the first week, and then lost 31-14 at Virginia Tech this past Saturday. About how you figure that might go. Played them tough for a half, and then Virginia Tech, I think, dominated the second half. So, we'll see. Get into more of Marshall next week, I suppose. But again, you got to like where Ohio State's at, 2-0. They did drop them in the polls, but understandable. Texas, coming off that big win at Michigan, deserved to move up. And again, it becomes, the potential of your team, the ceiling of your team, the perceived ceiling of your team versus the accomplishments of some other teams in the early portion of the season who have actually played Power 4 opponents. So you kind of have to reconcile one against the other and just understand that it's all going to come out in the wash at the end. The top 4 teams will, the 4 highest ranked conference champions will get the 4 seeds. I want to say the 4 best teams will get the top 4 seeds because that's probably not going to be what it is. But win your games and everything else will take care of itself.
Yeah, having Georgia and Texas at the top, we know that can't be the top 2 seeds. For one, they play each other. For 2, they're in the same conference. So the polls right now or at any point are sometimes fun to talk about. With the improvement week, players are feeling pretty good about what they've done these first 2 weeks. So the position coaches are showing them, here's where you haven't done well, and here's where we can get better. Here's what you've done well. Here's where we can get better. And as Will Howard said after the game, there's still meat on the bone. And we saw that. We saw that the first week against Akron. We saw that this past week against Western Michigan. The offense can be better. There could have been an 80-yard touchdown run from Quinshon Judkins. There could have been a 60-yard touchdown pass to Jeremiah Smith. Like, these things with just better execution make things look even better. And not just make things look better, they are better. The execution is there. As Ryan Day says, the standard is the standard regardless of the opponent. So they didn't hit that standard as much as they wanted. I don't know how many champions they had. Ryan Day didn't really talk about that. But overall, the offensive line was better. The running game was much better. So I think you're seeing the positives, and that when Day says that the running game takes time and that Chip Kelly's going to be patient with it, you saw some of the results of that this past week. So continue to keep everybody not just fresh, but Ryan Day said this is a hungry team right now, so you got to feed them in practice, give them a couple of days off, and then get right back to it. You don't want them hitting a lull. And nobody's going to be worried about Marshall, but how worried was Notre Dame about Northern Illinois after winning at College Station?
How worried was Notre Dame 2 years ago when they played Marshall?
Yeah.
Western Michigan went to Wisconsin. The one score comparison that makes Ohio State's effort look extra extraordinary is, of course, Western Michigan leading at Wisconsin by a point in the fourth quarter. So Wisconsin, nobody expects them to be any kind of national contender, but they're a decent team and a quality program. And they had that kind of struggle against Western Michigan, and Ohio State clearly did not. You guys got a firsthand look at Quinshon Judkins for the first time do some work. What were your impressions about? Of course, you've seen him on tape at Ole Miss, and you've seen him in week one, but he was able to open it up more in this one, just in regards to running style and so forth.
Tony, if you want to go first, I assume, did you do a breakdown on his runs at Ole Miss like you did all the Howard throws way back when this came out?
Well, and the thing is, and we kind of talked about it, I think last week, Judkins last year struggled when he averaged like 5.7 yards per carry as a freshman, and that was down to like 4.4 last year. He could never get really going, and he had one or two good games, but he'd get 25 carries for 105 yards. Like, it was nothing. It was never really fancy. This was the first time in 6 games he averaged over 4.5 yards a carry, and he averaged like 11. So he had been in, I wouldn't want to say a slump, but he's been at tough yards. And you saw this could have been 188 yards, something like that, if that one doesn't get called back. But just really, you saw how explosive he is, and I think getting his feet wet and just getting a little bit more comfortable in against Akron, and also the offensive line getting more comfortable, and Chip Kelly getting more comfortable in terms of what to call the RPO game. Like, everything started to come together, and you saw the potential. And it's just Western Michigan, but it was impressive. 2 23-yard runs, hitting the seams, hitting the holes, being patient, and then being sudden when he needed to. And we all saw how explosive he was, and I had to feel good for him to get back to that, because he didn't get to do much of that last year.
Yeah, I thought what it looked like to me was against Akron, his first 4 carries, I think, were like 0-1, 0-1 in some order. I think he netted 2 yards on his first 4 carries. And it was just kind of hard for him to get much traction going forward, whereas Travion Henderson came out really strong last week against Akron and played reasonably well this week against Western Michigan as well. But what this looked like to me was, one, the offensive line had a week to improve its systems and seemed to be hitting on a lot of the cylinders. I don't know if they hit on all of them, but they hit out of 9 out of 10, let's put it that way. But it looked like to me like Carlos Loughlin, the running backs coach slash goodness, what is the word I'm looking for? Inspirational guru, who really gets his guys going, spent the week in Quinshon Judkins' ear about how he's got to play much better than he did against Akron, because he came out from his first carry and he ran angry and he ran pissed off. And I think when he gets it going, it's going to be something to see. And I think if they block and give him the creases he needs to run over people, run around people, run through people, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch, because he showed some he showed a lot of heart, I thought, with how hard he played, how hard he ran the first several times, finishing plays, finishing runs. And if that's the Quinshon Judkins that we are in for in the Big Ten, and Travion Henderson is going to keep playing like he's been playing, then I think that is some really bad news for the 9 Big Ten opponents on this schedule coming up. So, 10 when you count the championship game, maybe 11 if you count the playoffs. So, going to be a long year, fellas. But the big thing to me is, again, every week they get Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson through the game without getting one of them dinged up is a victory, no doubt.
They had 683 yards of total offense in this game, which was the 6th highest in the last 10 years, tying the Rose Bowl against Utah, the 6th highest for Ohio State. First time since 2022 with CJ Stroud at quarterback against Toledo. They had 400 yards of total offense in the first half. So it's just Western Michigan, but they're doing stuff that they rarely do. And so I think that is encouraging for the offense as a whole, with Will Howard throwing for 270 some yards in the first half. Going through some of those numbers, and I was shocked to be reminded that Ohio State put up 500 yards of total offense in one half against Michigan State a few years back. And I think that may have been the 49-0 at the half against the Spartans. And that is some ridiculous numbers. And Ohio State wasn't too far off of that one in this one against a lower level, but still an FBS opponent.
A Michigan State team that won the Peach Bowl and finished in the top 10 in the country.
I mean, you said it.
Ryan Dawes, appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for the contribution, Ryan. It's always good to see you. What game are you fellas most interested in this weekend with our beloved Buckeyes on a bye? And if I know Tony, I know that he's, of course, always looking forward to the Ohio State games, but also looks forward to these opportunities just to kind of kick back and take in the entire day.
Yeah, well, I think the great thing is it starts on Thursday. There's a decent game that could be decent. Arizona State at Texas State. I mean, Texas State might be one of those teams to watch in the group of 5. But my first thought is the Friday night game, Arizona at Kansas State on Fox. I think that's going to be high scoring, entertaining, something to watch. And then, of course, we'll settle in Saturday, and I'll have the main TV probably on Michigan, just because that's what I do, and then the second TV on Alabama, Wisconsin for a little bit to see how that goes. And maybe it'll be, if it goes like Alabama went last week, it's going to be a 4-quarter game. So we'll see there. But then, I think Oregon State is pretty sneaky. That's one that you just better be careful with. And Notre Dame at Purdue would be better to me if Notre Dame had won last week, but Purdue's going to be so ramped up for this one. That'll be a fun one to watch. So those are some of the ones. And I know it's not a great week, but I always say it's the not great weeks where you have the craziest fourth quarters and endings and upsets. So just be wary of that.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's hit on most of the big ones. LSU, South Carolina at noon. Is South Carolina for real? LSU would definitely not want to come back with 2 losses this early in the season. And that is a road game at Williams-Brice Stadium there in Columbia. Probably about 80,000 people will be there for that game. It's the last time for now that Cincinnati is going to go to Miami, Ohio, up in Oxford and play. They're kind of canceling their series, and they've played since the 1800s, which is kind of interesting. Cincinnati being in the Big 12 probably figures they've got some bigger fish to fry and don't want to waste a road game on Miami of Ohio. Boston College at Missouri is kind of a fun one. Boston College beat Florida State earlier on, and now they're on the road at Missouri. Missouri hasn't played anybody yet. two laughers for them. Are they for real? What else? Notre Dame, Purdue, interesting, I suppose. Is Purdue quasi legitimate at all? I guess we'll find that out a little bit. Washington State at Washington. The game's actually being played at the Seahawks Stadium and not at Husky Stadium. So that's interesting. Backyard brawl, West Virginia and Pittsburgh. Pitt coming off the win over Cincinnati. And they fired Heather Lyke, the athletic director, who had done a lot of good things there at Pittsburgh, somebody that we are relatively acquainted with because she used to work as an assistant athletic director at Ohio State under Gene Smith, and back for 20 years probably she was at Ohio State before going to Pitt. Scrolling on down, Ole Miss at Wake Forest. Wake Forest just lost, I think, to Virginia. Does that sound right this past week?
Yes, 31-30.
Yeah. So, Ole Miss has to go on the road. We'll see. Georgia at Kentucky. Kentucky just got killed by South Carolina at home. So you think Georgia will probably do the same thing. Indiana at UCLA, primetime on NBC. Both teams off to a good start so far this season. And Deshaun Foster, first-year coach at UCLA. Kurt Cignetti, first-year coach at Indiana, will be a big win for whoever comes out of there with the win. I don't know what to make of it. I don't know whether Indiana's improved or whether UCLA is any good at all. So that one probably goes down to the wire like 23-20 probably, and whoever has it at the end probably wins. Colorado State. That one will be in Fort Collins, 7:30 on CBS. That Mountain West package comes in handy for CBS. Colorado proven this past week at Nebraska that they are all cowboy hat and no cattle. And so we'll see what materializes there. Maryland, how do you lose at home to Michigan State? Now on the road at Virginia and running the risk of a second loss already this season, and just not good. Cal coming off a big win, over Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
They're hosting San Diego State. So if you want to look, behind the names of the teams and the fact that there aren't a lot of ranked teams playing and only one game with ranked teams playing one another, and it's on Friday night, this Fox, they always land jelly up, it seems, with these TV games. And they also selected Illinois, Nebraska next Friday, which looks like potentially both those teams could be undefeated going into that game. They've landed jelly up here so far on their Friday night picks. So I got to go to a high school game Friday, so I'll get home in time to catch the end of that. And there'll probably be 4 or 5 ranked teams that lose, obviously to unranked teams, but darned if I can't tell you who they'd be. I'd say LSU is a possibility. If South Carolina has anything at all, that could get dicey for LSU.
I will say there is one game between ranked opponents on Saturday, and it's the one that we all projected and predicted, and that's Boston College, number 24 Missouri. At Missouri. So there's going to be a ranked loss there likely for Boston College, but they do have some potential. I love their quarterback when he's doing the right things. Mark, what are you looking forward to? What are you watching?
Well, I love that the powers that be made the Apple Cup and the Civil War happen. So even with the teams leaving the Pac-12 demise and then, of course, moving on, the powers that be and lined them up on the same weekend. So I think that's really cool that we get the continuation of those two rivalry games, and they should be decent games. Is Oregon going to continue to mess around? And we shall see if they get their act together. And then with Washington State, they turned in an excellent game against Texas Tech. And so those should be interesting. Steve, I didn't think was going to uncover, but he was sifting through the schedule so meticulously that he did find it. I love odd type of situations, and Indiana going to the Rose Bowl, to me, that just, I love, before they become 4-7 or 3-8 down the line, I love watching these kind of games just to see if there's any life there. And I would the only place where we would differ, Steve, would be I think the team that gets the ball last is going to lose, most likely that one.
Could
But
be.
my
I
money's
think
on the defense or the lack of offense in that one,
I know
possibly.
Indiana, Minnesota, and Purdue tied for the Big Ten championship in 1967, the year before Ohio State won the national championship, and Purdue was number one for the first portion of 1968. I want to say Indiana went to the Rose Bowl that season, I believe.
Yes. Lost to USC.
Okay, so that USC or the Pac-12 didn't have a no repeat rule like the Big Ten did, because USC then lost to Ohio State the next year in the Rose Bowl. I want to say John Pont may have been the coach at Indiana at that time. And what am I missing on this? Oh, it's the first time Indiana and UCLA will have ever played one another. So they've never done a home and home series, Indiana and UCLA. And obviously the first time for Indiana back in that stadium since that January 1 of 1968 Rose Bowl against USC. So Kurt Signetti said, it is a great setting and will be wonderful, he said, but once they kick the ball off, it could be played in the parking lot. It could be played anywhere. It's just the football field that you're worried about. And, great that Indiana gets to go. Again, I've been outspoken. I don't like this part of our new paradigm. I don't like where it's nationwide conferences make no sense to me. I mean, in a country this big, if we had a smaller nation, guys, then, whatever, but all day travel for these teams to go play these games just doesn't, make sense to me. But, whatever. I mean, it was better when you did it like once every 5 years, go out and play Washington and then 5 years go out there and play USC or whatever. But to be committed to do it once a year now, it seems a bit much to me.
And I agree, Tony. It seems to be the odd week 3, where the heavy hitters usually schedule each other week 1 or week 2 because they want the warm-up game, and then week 2. And it's before we're fully entrenched in conference play, and it becomes kind of a messy week of just oddball games that make it interesting for the hardcore college football fan. For the periphery person that's looking for Oklahoma to be playing Clemson or Texas to be playing Alabama, not a good week for them, because really Alabama, Wisconsin is the biggest name brand game on the surface. But if you believe in the results of Wisconsin's performance the first 2 weeks, it could be a little messy. And maybe Alabama's scare last week got their attention. It is on the road. That obviously is one of the more difficult places to play in college football, which favors Wisconsin. So hopefully they can make it a game. And I will say this about the Big Ten. If you look at the results, 4-4 against the other power conferences. However, so close. Minnesota loses on the final play of the game. Northwestern loses on the final play of the game. There's another one.
Iowa
loses on the final play of the game. Otherwise, 7-1. Texas beat down of Michigan was the only one that was decisive. And
well,
Steve,
you changed 15 plays in that Michigan game, and the Wolverines are going to get that win. 25 plays tops.
And I think you got to give Boise's not a Power 4 team, but I think they're probably the best, or in the top 3 in the Group of 5 poll. I would say you got to give Oregon half a credit on there for beating Boise, even though it took a punt return touchdown, a kick return touchdown, and a field goal on the final play. That was the breakdown for Jerry DiNardo and Urban Meyer this week on Big Ten Network, that film breakdown. I think Urban has to fly to Chicago one day a week to go sit in the darkened film room with Jerry DiNardo, unless they're flying Jerry DiNardo to wherever Urban is to do it. But they sat there and marveled over Oregon's special teams and how important. I mean, that's 17 points in a game they won, 34-31 or whatever that final score was. It was a 3-point win. So 17 points they had to have. So I think, and to devolve off, where you guys were going with that, Oregon coming up for Ohio State in a few weeks, I think you have to question their defense. How good is their defense if, they're giving up this number of points out of these first couple opponents. But I will lay out now after that. Go ahead.
Did Urban and Jerry break down the guy dropping the ball at the half-yard line on the kickoff return or the punt return for the touchdown? Did you guys see that?
Yeah, I guess since Oregon picked it up shortly thereafter, they're like, you know what, let's just let the touchdown be. But it is amazing that players still do that.
Well, in the press conference yesterday, Ryan Day was asked about Jaden Ballard, and he tried to fair catch a punt and dropped it, and luckily got back on top of it. Of course, if he fumbled it, they weren't going to lose the game. But I believe, didn't he also fair catch a kickoff and then fielded it as it hit the ground? And the question that I have is, doesn't he have to field that? Because if it stays in the field of play, isn't that a live ball? I mean, I don't know, but it was, I guess you don't say you're going to fair catch it unless you can actually catch it out of the sky. Maybe that's the lesson on that. But because when Fair caught it on a bounce, they blew it dead and gave him the ball at the 6-yard line, and that's a misplay. You can't do that, obviously.
Yeah, they love Brandon Ennis because he saves them yards. Jaden Ballard right now has cost them yards, and Ryan Day talked about he got that job. Jaden Ballard got that job because of a strong summer, strong off season. Was a gold member of the team, and so they gave him this. But also, the job is back up for grabs because the most important thing is taking care of the football. And if you're not going to do that, they're going to find somebody that will. So it may still be Jaden Ballard when we see them next week, but he's going to have to keep the job. He's going to have to win the job back again. So I'll be interested to see what is going on there at kickoff return.
Steve wants to talk some Bama, Wisconsin. I was going to take us in the Michigan direction because we do have the super chat coming in from Yakov.
We got about a half hour here.
We'll get to Bama, Wisconsin, but Yakov is leading us into this, and I think there's a few different angles on the Michigan program, of course. If you followed the Sharon Moore contract situation is finally signed and sealed, which my interpretation is we just got our butts kicked and we looked awful, and a lot of that could be targeted at the head coach's lack of preparation of this team and horrible. Well, there was no game management because they were trailing the entire time, but there was just, I'll start with Alex Orji. If he's not going to run the ball on 3rd and 3, 3rd and 5, then, then death taxes. And, it's one of those deals that's all they do. Could they not have taught this guy and repped him through maybe 3 pass plays that he could get down? Just, this is all we're doing. We're going to rep you every day on these 3 pass plays, and therefore we can keep the defense honest. No, we're going to run right at the Texas defense on 3rd and 3, 3rd and 5. It happened 3 times. This was the most predictable thing in the world. So it was a badly prepared game plan, not just for that reason, but Michigan just did not look prepared for Texas. Obviously, Steve, I'll give it up to you because you've been talking the entire offseason. The Michigan team is not the same. I was holding on to culture, toughness, etc., defense. And the defense, which I expected, okay, if there's a 31 on the scoreboard for Texas at the end of the game, it's going to be because the defense wore down. Nope, the defense got dragged around the field from the first drive.
Yep.
So maybe missing Rod Moore is a bigger deal than we thought. Maybe even though their new linebackers, Ernest Hausman, who obviously was with the team but not a starter last year, and Jayshon Barham from Maryland are extremely athletic and better athletes than Junior Colson and Michael Barrett. But maybe those guys getting people in the right place was missed on this day against Texas.
Yeah, what was it, 24-3 or 24-6 at halftime? It was not a good situation, obviously, for Michigan to fall behind that far of a margin. I think you have to also give Texas a ton of credit. This is Quinn Ewers, who is regarded as one of, if not the top quarterback in the country. And he showed everybody what he's made of, I think, in this game. I think he had complete command, it felt, at times of the entire football game. And it was just kind of like he was dictating the terms, to Michigan. of their surrender, so to speak. I mean, it's 31-6 in the second half. So this was his, we talk about Joe Burrow early in that Heisman season. I think he went to Texas, I believe, and put a number on Texas. And I think that is kind of what Quinn Ewers just did for Texas at Michigan. I've been saying it's a 4-loss team at Michigan. And people on Twitter have, posted, if you thought, it was going to be the same team when you lose this laundry list of starters plus this laundry list of coaches from the team last year, then you obviously don't follow college football very closely. And that was my take on them all along. So this just feels to me like a market correction, I guess, on them, that, water reaches its level, however you want to put it, that all is right with the world again, that they're back where they should be. And again, they needed to desperately go out and find a quarterback, and they didn't do that. So in the transfer portal. So that was pretty much illustrated, and not to mention a few more starters to plug holes on defense as well. So to me, they've got USC coming in a few weeks. USC seems like they are playing lights out football. They did not take a step back after beating LSU. We saw Notre Dame beat Texas A&M away from home, and then come home. Everybody told them how great they were for a week, and then they lost to a MAC team for the first time in school history to Northern Illinois. They'd been 10-0 all time against MAC opponents prior to that, and lose to Northern Illinois. What was the reverse at USC? They went on the road to Vegas, beat LSU, had everybody telling them how great they were for a week, and then just went out and absolutely dismantled. I think it was Utah State there on Saturday. So, and Utah State typically has been middle of the road, Mountain West. I don't know exactly if they're going to be that good this year or not. They play Utah this coming week, but USC is coming to Michigan in a couple of weeks as well. And, it's probably going to look a lot the same if they don't get their stuff together quick up there in Ann Arbor.
Well, and the trip to Illinois doesn't look as easy anymore, does it? This is a season where once we saw USC the way they were playing against LSU, and once we saw the way Michigan was playing against Fresno State, it looked like things were trending towards 2-2 right at that moment. But in terms of, I've got plenty of stuff to say. Mika is saying Will Johnson is overrated. They didn't target Will Johnson at all in this game, and they were fine. So you can avoid Will Johnson, and he's gonna take away a receiver. That's fine. We've got others, and good luck defending them. Jayshon Barham was not good in coverage. Safeties, Makari Page was giving up catches. He's your captain. He's your best safety right now because Rod Moore is out. Texas wore them down over the course of drives. Wink Martindale putting Mason Graham at defensive end instead of defensive tackle is boggling to me. And then they get down in Texas gets down into the red zone, and Mason Graham's on the sideline. What? I know, I love the fact that they substitute as much as they do, but you do that smartly, not dumbly. And they did it dumbly in this one by putting Mason Graham on the bench in the red zone. And so there were some mistakes made, but the disparity in skill, Mason Graham is great. Kenneth Grant really hasn't done anything yet this season, has been remarkable. So I think that needs to step up because we've talked about those two being the best tandem in the country. They're not showing it right now. And some of that is because Mason Graham isn't at defensive tackle as much as he should be. But so there's some issues, and they attacked Jair Hill, the other corner. He held up some, not entirely. The offensive line for Michigan is trouble. The Yakov saying Tony Alford plus Donovan Edwards equals a bad run game. The Donovan Edwards that we've seen this season is the Donovan Edwards who exists among us in this world. The outliers are the big games, and I think he's had maybe like 5 remarkable games in his career in terms of having a high output in yards per carry because he hits home runs in those games. And I think I said it here last week, 20%, 1/5 of his career yards, his career rushing yards have come on 5 carries. And before this past game, he had 305 carries in his career. Almost 20% of his yards came on 1.6% of his carries. So it's the other 98.4% of his carries that exhibit who Donovan Edwards is. And this is who Donovan Edwards is. We saw he almost broke one, but he got tackled by the one guy that could tackle him and barely got a hand on him. And so to expect it to be something other than that, I don't think you should. There are going to be some times where he does break out because we've seen it. There's proof of that. But it's usually after he runs into a pile of people and somehow doesn't get tackled and then comes out and then is free. And there's nobody around because everybody just went to tackle the pile. And so those 5 carries, if somebody would have done their job each of those times, then his yards would be much, much lower. Now, to your last point, Mark, or your first point about Alex Orji, why don't you have passes that you can throw? I think they did. And against Fresno State, they had him throw one pass about 6 yards downfield, and he skipped it. And so then they're like, well, that's it. I don't know how they went into this whole thing with the quarterback situation that they have. And I know people say, well, it's not the quarterback. It's not the quarterback. It's also the quarterback, I would say, with Davis Warren, because they can't stretch the field with him. I've got, I did numbers and I know I'm looking for them now. Like I think it was 2 of 7 on passes more than 5 yards downfield against in the first 3 quarters, because that's really all we're talking about in the first 3 quarters against Texas, because in the fourth quarter, they're backed way off and prevent, and they'll just give up catches after catch. But yeah, it was 2 of 7 on passes of more than 5 yards downfield, 2 interceptions. Those 2 completions, one was a flea flicker, so it's a trick play. Another was a scramble play that he hit Colston Loveland, had to throw back across his body into traffic, and Colston Loveland came down with it. Other than that, there is nothing there. He was 7 of 9 on passes 5 yards and under, with I think 4 of those going 1 yard or behind the line of scrimmage. So they can't stretch the field. They have no receivers that can stretch the field right now. And I'll just keep throwing numbers out to you. And so 31 times the receivers have been targeted this year. Michigan's receivers have been targeted for a total of 147 yards. They're averaging 4.7 yards per target. Jeremiah Smith, not fair to compare him to anybody, is averaging 3 times that per target. Ohio State, the Michigan receivers, and I'm just trying to look at all of my numbers here. So 31 for 147. Ohio State's receivers have been targeted 50 times this year for 555 yards, 11.1 yards per target. Again, these are 2 very different receiving cores, but also Michigan just won a national championship last year. Like, you should not have this level of playmaker, this low, like there's nothing there. There's no fear from a defense of the playmakers. The only fear here is make sure Donovan Edwards doesn't get outside. And also let's try to stop Kalal Mullings at the line of scrimmage so that he doesn't get 5 yards on us. And then if Colston Loveland beats us, it is what it is. But even him, he's averaging under 10 yards a catch. Like, you'll take that.
Your offense is in trouble when your best player is a tight end. That is typically not a good thing, unless he's Brock Bowers and you've got 10 other guys that are much below him, and they're all NFL players.
There's no Stetson Bennett here.
And the Donovan Edwards, I could not have framed it any better than that, but I cannot believe this stat, Tony. Let's post this. So we've got Donovan Edwards with 313 carries in his career.
Mm-hmm.
And go over that stat again.
Well, and so this was before this past game, so I don't have the exact numbers now,
Sure.
But basically 19% of his career yards at this point now have come on 5 carries. And those are carries, 2 of them, 10% of his career yards as of last week have come on the 2 carries against Ohio State in 2022, the 75-yarder and the 85-yarder. Like that, those are extreme outliers that have created this kind of house of cards for what people think Donovan Edwards has been and is. And people talk about Gus Johnson calling him the Don. I mean, he's a Don. If we want to get to the Ohio State or an Ohio State, he is a Don at this point.
Well, Gus Johnson is the John Sterling of college football announcers. He's just an entertainer, just wants to make up nicknames and not necessarily understand what's being played in front of him. But that's another matter. That's astounding. Yeah, Michigan, we thought Roman Wilson and Cornelius Johnson were just decent receivers, but shoot, they would love to have those two guys right now. And Khalil Mullings, this hit me in watching him against Texas and then watching the rest of the day in college football. He's a nice back. But man, there are some beasts out there running the football. Jaquindon Jackson is not even a star player, but at Arkansas, I'm watching him and Ollie Gordon obviously didn't have a great day, but we know what he can do. And I'm just watching these backs across the nation and thinking Khalil Mullings he's a nice back, but he's not an upper echelon back himself. But he has to be RB1 because Donovan Edwards is exactly what you just made him out to be. If you've got either him, running into a pile and able to bounce it and just find this Mack truck sized lane that he's an athlete. He can run fast. And I've never seen a run where he either showed great vision or great slash elusiveness or ability to break tackles.
And they're not using him in the passing game at all right now. Can you throw that graphic back up of the Donovan Edwards? Because
which they should.
Yeah,
that's
definitely should.
That he has.
So those 5 carries, 67 yarder, 75, 85, 41, and 60. So his career average 5.5 yards per carry now. He's now played 26 games, I believe. And I'm just looking at that. And in terms of maybe the last 3 years, whatever that number is, but he's only hit his average of 5.5 yards per carry 8 times in his career in the last 3 years. Like, that also tells you that that's not actually your average yards per carry. That's a bloated statistic based on some long runs. And then Khalil Mullings, he's a more consistent guy. So then he becomes, we just need that 4 yards. We just need that 5 yards. Whereas for anybody else, any other major program, especially one that relies on the running game, you want more than just 4 or 5 yards. Like, you want somebody that can go the distance. And Donovan Edwards has shown he can do that. But I think people think he does it a lot more than he actually does it. And now I will step off my soapbox.
The Iowa running back, Caleb Johnson, is somewhat of a version of that, but I think there's more meat to the bone, and I think there's more substance there to him being able to grind out some. But he's kind of similar in that way too. He's a specimen that rips off huge runs and did against Iowa State. They should have ran away with that game on Saturday. Interesting stuff. And then the Sharon Moore contract, I'd mentioned that at the start of the Michigan segment here. The timing to me reeks of we're proving our confidence in our head coach despite what you saw on Saturday.
Yeah. Wow. They're stuck. I don't know what else to say. They're stuck. I don't know.
Is the contract signing the dreaded vote of confidence? Is that where we are right now?
It's what it seems like. I don't know.
I mean, the memorandum of understanding that he was operating under is not unusual until a contract gets signed. But it is interesting that he was one of 2 head coaches that had not signed their contracts yet, and that it suddenly gets signed within 2 weeks of the story coming out. And it does make you wonder. But I wonder that contract will be FOIA'd pretty quickly if it hasn't already, if they haven't released the details, and you'll see what kind of caveats are in there that the ones that Jim Harbaugh didn't want in there, maybe, who knows?
Quite intriguing. Yes. I appeared on the Michigan podcast this week, and Steve Dace's kind of theme for the entire deal was, oh, well, we won the Natty, meaning to say, hey, it's all icing on the cake. It's all gravy now, 7-5, whatever it is. We won the Natty. I'm going to cherish that. And yes, I see it all falling apart in front of me, but what can you do? I've got my memories.
Oh, but you'll have the memories.
Maybe not the hardware, possibly, but you'll have the memories.
Well, I mean, and the thing with the memories, I mean, Michigan fans still get upset when people talk about their half national championship from '97, like not giving them full credit. People are going to give them credit for this national championship last year, so it's going to continue to drive them crazy, whether or not it ever gets removed.
What I find amazing is that nobody cared about that program for about 15 years, and then they all came out of the woodwork, the last couple of years when they started winning again. Here in Ohio, you never saw any Michigan shirts for the last 10, 15 years, and now there's somebody on every corner wearing one, and I think we're about to go back into that hibernation period, I think, here for the next several years.
You're giving me flashbacks to high school when it used to just drive me crazy that I'd see as many Michigan shirts as Ohio State shirts in my high school.
And they'd seem like normal, well-adjusted people, and then they would flash that stuff, a bumper sticker or a sweatshirt or something, and you're just like, really? Really? I mean, I don't know. Whatever.
I grew up in Northwest Ohio, so if you it was always like the kids that I knew and the people that I knew that were Michigan fans did it just to be different and rile people up, but they stopped. I think like you guys said, the shirts and the coats went away. I think a lot of them have come back, of course.
Not
recently,
04.
but
04, 05, it all just kind of went whap, and that was that. So about the time of that Gonzalez catch, the 4-yard line, that was the one that
Yeah, beautiful 5 minutes of football to end that game. All right, Steve, before we get to Alabama, Wisconsin, I wanted to ask you guys about Arvell Reese seems to be the one player on a team that was as airtight from a personnel standpoint, too deep standpoint going into the season as you can expect a college football team to be. The one guy that has made a move. So you've got the floor to talk about him, but anybody else that's stood out in the first couple weeks that has made a upward climb in regards to playing time possibilities?
Well, I'll just lead out on Reese. He's earned a battlefield promotion, no doubt, with the way he triggered and made plays in the first 2 games. And very telling on the second series, I think he was out there in a 3-linebacker set, which they weren't planning to do a whole lot of that. But it was him, Simon, and Styles all out there playing together. And he was on the field well before C.J. Hicks got on the field later on. So that whole discussion has now flipped to going to find ways to get Arvell Reese on the field. And Ryan Day and Jim Knowles were asked about possibly slotting C.J. Hicks as a down pass rusher in some instances just to get him on the field. And that was telling. Ryan Day said, yeah, we've talked about it. Jim Knowles said, no, we really haven't talked about it. So I don't know if it's been talked about or not, but on the message boards it's talked about because people see that CJ Hicks, if you just put him in a down position and say, go get football, he can do that. But we've got a thread on our board, some of the lines of CJ Hicks is not a very good football player or something like that. And I hate to see that stuff on our message board. And ordinarily we would lock and delete stuff like that. But, just because there's no really good, I mean, make a fair comment about it, but don't take it too far with, value judgment that somebody can't play the game. So at any rate, Arvell has earned his spot. And as you said, he was not a guy that I think people thought he was going to take a ton of plays, but now it looks like he might get to play about 20-25% of the plays in a given competitive game going forward. And I think that's only a good thing for him. Jermaine Matthews had to fill in when Denzel Burke got ejected. When that play happened, I thought it was the initial hit that they were looking at, but Burke was the second guy to hit the ball carrier. And, they looked at the fact that, he lowered his helmet, but so did the ball carrier. And to me, it seemed like he kind of glanced off the side and not the crown, but maybe used his own crown. I don't know, but they ruled that as an ejection, and it was kind of a glancing blow more than a forcible contact hit. But then again, I don't know how um, helpless receiver or defenseless receiver or whatever term that is, if that involved in it or other. But you see 20 worse hits than the Burke one, and guys stay in the game. So I'll be darned if I know that. But Jermaine Matthews stepped up in that situation, which was good. In Austin Sierreveld, I think from week 1 to week 2, he made some tremendous improvement. He did give up a sack or held the guy on the sack or whatever that was. And that was one bad play. But I thought from week 1 to week 2, otherwise he played pretty well.
Steve, you're saying that Denzel Burke was the second gunman on that? Because when you watch the ball carrier go back into the left,
back into the left. Yeah, there was a second spitter. Yeah.
The Arvell Reese thing is fascinating to me, and it's going to be even more fascinating to see how much he actually plays against Oregon, because he's fine now. You can throw him in any game now, and there's no concern. But the real truth comes out in who plays against Oregon, and to a much lesser extent, which defenders play against Iowa. But that's where the real truth comes out. And the way that Arvell Reese is playing, number one, it seems like he's not going to just disappear. I think they're still going to continue to play him. Now, Oregon is going to spread everybody out, and they've not been able to run the ball. So they may have to do some different things with their linebackers in that game regardless. But he's been everything that they've been saying, which is almost never the case in terms of they will prop players up. And, we've seen it with CJ Hicks as well. But the other thing that Jim Knowles has always said about CJ Hicks is he's better when they just point and say, go run that straight line. He's slower when it comes to actually being a linebacker. And so they don't want to move him right now because that kind of undoes what the development that is going on. And they keep talking about how they need him at linebacker. And so at this point now, CJ Hicks is going to have to hold off Gabe Powers. I see Mika posting about him in a thread. He's been doing well in small batches, and he's made plays. CJ Hicks needs to start making some plays as well. But yeah, it's been interesting to watch that Arvell Reese development, and he is in line very much so to be the starting middle linebacker next year for the Buckeyes. I don't know who else would even be in that picture other than Sonny Styles, because he did it in game 1. They love Arvell Reese, and he's going to be on the field a lot moving forward. I just wonder how much in big games and matchup games this year we'll see him.
Well, Steve, Wisconsin fans can hope that Luke Fickell does not turn into their version of Mike Riley, because Bo Pelini was not good enough at Nebraska winning 9 games, and Paul Chryst was not good enough at Wisconsin apparently winning 9 games a year. And so now Luke Fickell, with in some ways a similar successful resume to Mike Riley, takes over at Wisconsin, and he's trying to transition this program. And they brought him there again, not to beat Iowa and the like, but to win games like this. And it's going to be a tall order, of course, on Saturday with Alabama in town.
Yeah, Wisconsin, barring some talent upgrades and finding some NIL money under the couch cushions to buy some better players, is going to be running the risk of being one of those also-rans in the Big Ten. You've got the upper crust, with USC, Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, Penn State, who are going to be perpetually, top 20 teams that are top 10 or, whatever in the hunt for the playoff berths. Three of those 5 are going to be in the playoffs most years, it would feel. And then can a third or fourth other, another Big Ten team kind of force their way into the playoff with a 10-2 season out of nowhere. And Wisconsin is running the risk of falling into that next caste below the upper crust, where Wisconsin's been at or near the top, for a good long period here. And I thought Fickell would be the guy that could do it there. Of course, only in his second full season. The first 2 games this year were not overwhelming successes, I think, for Wisconsin. They trailed Western Michigan in the fourth quarter and eventually won 28-14 after Western Michigan helped them out, muffed a punt. And then this past week, it was South Dakota, I think, was the opponent. And they won 27-13 at home against an FCS opponent. The new quarterback, Tyler Van Dyke, has been right around 200 yards both games. They've also rushed for right around 200 yards both games. Ches Malusi got loose a little bit this past week, had a couple touchdowns in the win against South Dakota. They're going to be able to establish the run as they have in the past against a big, rugged team like Alabama. I think that's going to be interesting. This is Alabama's first road game in a Big Ten venue since Penn State in 2011. And that was, of course, as you know, Nick Saban had already won a championship or maybe even two by that point, and was, or maybe he'd only had the one in 2009, I think, at that point, but was on his way to many more there at Alabama. And they went in there and won like 26-11 or something screwy like that. But, you know, that feels like if Wisconsin can play keep away and establish the run, it feels like this game could be in the 20s. If not, if Alabama can make some dynamic big plays and get some, you know, and they've got the quarterback to do it with Jalen Milroe, who may be, you know, again with yours, one of the top quarterbacks in the country, one of the top college football players in the country, you know, where they can put a quick 7 or 14 points on the board and get some separation from Wisconsin in the blink of an eye type thing, you know, 2 plays, 75 yards type scoring drive, then, you know, it could be a long day there at Camp Randall. Unfortunately for them, this is the noon game on Fox and not the 7:30 game on NBC, where all the gremlins kind of come out at night there at Camp Randall. But Alabama, 63-0 over Western Kentucky, and then 42-16 over South Florida. And I know that was a close game in the third quarter before Alabama eventually got some breathing room there. But, you know, is Wisconsin good enough to give them a 4-quarter game? I don't know. I think like 31-17, something like that is what we're looking at. Alabama's favored by 16 in this game. You know, they could very easily win the game by 3 touchdowns, I suppose, but more likely with the game at Wisconsin, something, you know, 27-17, 31-17, something like that just kind of feels right to me.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, you said the 16, I'm wondering when the last time they were 16-point underdogs at home, and I just started scrambling for the Phil Steele last 40 years of lines, and there's too much to look through there. But
it has to be early 90s. I mean, it has to be before, you know, right when Alvarez took over. They were terrible from whoever he took it over from there in the late 80s. Has to go back 35 years, I would think.
I mean, it's hard to find them as 16-point underdogs on the road, but last year Ohio State was a 14.5-point favorite up there, so that's about as close to. And just a quick look,
and they didn't cover, did they? They only won by 14, didn't they?
Yeah, they did not cover.
24-10 was that?
Yeah, 24-10, and but
boy, that was a slog. God, that was an awful football game.
But
God.
Ohio State will take that every single time up there. You mentioned don't give up big plays. Only 4 Big Ten teams have given up fewer or more plays of 20 yards or more than Wisconsin this year. So they've been giving up some decent chunks. And if you give a Wisconsin athlete or an Alabama athlete 20 yards, they may take it 80. So you got to be very, very, very careful and get some turnovers. Jalen Milroe will probably give you 1. So if you can take more than that, then you've got a chance. And Steve, if they're in the 20s, then that's close enough to come out in the fourth quarter with a win. But
yeah,
we'll see. Tyler Van Dyke's got to be better than he has been since his first year at Miami, or his first year as a starter at Miami.
It's a narrow path, that's for sure. It appears to be for the Badgers on this one.
And as we know, narrow paths for any Wisconsinite is not an easy fit.
Yeah, I got to think if 16 or 17 points and a point spread was ever approached at Wisconsin post Alvarez or Alvarez on, it had to be Ohio State. Wasn't going to be anybody else with that kind of point spread respect from Vegas.
The
Can't
old,
think of anybody else.
the old style will be flowing in the beer gardens there at 7 and 8 a.m. on Saturday. And, it's going to be a great scene. Very rare, as we said, for Alabama to come north of the Mason-Dixon line and play anybody. Of course, Ohio State will have them in the horseshoe in a few years as well. So that'll be kind of cool.
It's a great college town, and maybe the noon start is sleepy time for Alabama, and a night game would have them awake and ready for this. So maybe Wisconsin can sneak up on them. And I'm through like 1998, and I still haven't found one that approaches 16.5 points at home. Michigan was 14.5 points favorite in 1997, the year they shared a national championship with Nebraska, as we all know.
Yeah.
26-point underdogs at Ohio State in 96, but so is everybody. And yeah.
Good stuff. And that's in the Phil Steele,
the website.
Website.
The website.
Yeah.
Okay.
You go to each of the teams, and he's got like the last 40 years of lines, which is super helpful. Here we go. 1991. Number 17, Iowa was a 17.5 point favorite in Madison. To tell you how bad Wisconsin was that year, Indiana was also a 14-point favorite in Madison.
Wow.
So,
goodness.
91.
Who was the coach before Alvarez?
Oh my goodness. There was what's his name? Sloan was there. I can't think of his first name. I don't know if he was directly in front of. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's a great question. It's escaping my. I can picture the guy actually.
It was Don Morton in 87 to 89.
Who was prior to Morton? That's who I'm thinking of. I'm not thinking
Jim
of
Hiles. Dave McClain was in the late 70s, early 80s.
Dave McClain.
Dave McClain had some decent seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, they named trophies after him.
Yep. Dave McClain. Who's going to win the Big Ten Coach of the Year award this year? If somebody can go 13-0 and 10-0 against Big Ten teams, they deserve it, is my feeling in this new paradigm. But failing that, I mean, Jonathan Smith, I mean, he made an early run at it with that win at Maryland, I think. He won the very first Big Ten game of the season and his first Big Ten game as a head coach. I don't know. Who else could we look at? Lincoln Riley at USC, if they get to 10 or 11 wins.
How about Matt Rule?
Matt Rule at Nebraska. They haven't been to a bowl game since 2016. Geez, oh, Pete's.
I'd also throw Brett Bielema in there, but their schedule is going to get much harder.
Yeah, Brett Bielema. Yeah.
Good stuff. Not that I don't have enough shows to host, but we're going to start another one, folks. It's coming on a Thursday. Ole Miss Live. How about that? Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to start on the main channel. We started an Ole Miss channel, SEC channel. We'll be there with Leanne Herring from the Rebel Walk. So we're going to start that on Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. I counted 16 shows that I host per week. I was trying to take those numbers in the other direction. That was the intent, but
you got to hire some help, bud. You got to get some people to take some of these other ones on.
I have.
Yeah.
We just keep adding on. All right, that's what we do. Tony, appreciate you being here. What's going on there at Buckeye Huddle?
I'm going to write some offense and some defense today. Mainly just covered the press conferences yesterday, so I got to get back to write some stories. So you can find that at BuckeyeHuddle.com, and then of course dropped an episode of Buckeye Weekly talking about what we learned yesterday. So you can find that at all of your podcast platforms of choice.
Steve, what's the good word this week?
Well, having the open week with football, I had a chance. I did an interview with a national top 5 player in basketball, Darren Peterson from Canton. Made an official visit to Ohio State a week or two ago for the Akron game, and got a great interview with him. I think Ohio State is actually a possibility to land him at some point here later this fall. That'd be great basketball news, obviously. In terms of football, just trying to again, you can't overreact too much to playing great against Akron and Western Michigan, because the challenges are going to get much tougher, really each week going on. I was pretty impressed with the first half that Marshall played against Virginia Tech. So that's going to be maybe a tougher than most people think type game. It's not going to look like the Marshall or the Western Michigan and Akron games to me. They've got some athletes and some good sized athletes as well. And then at Michigan State, obviously they're gaining confidence each week under Jonathan Smith. Not a juggernaut just yet, but that game looks tougher. And then back home with Iowa, and then at Oregon. So, the real games will be here before we know it.
Folks, our next show is 6 p.m. Florida State Live, but at the same time, we've got a special edition Oregon Live, and Yogi Roth is from the Big Ten Network, our special guest there on the Oregon channel at 6 p.m. Eastern. So please join us there. Otherwise, we'll see you back here next Wednesday, most likely. Keep the notification bell on to know when we go live, and we'll see you next time.